In this video, you're going to learn how to consume a RESTful API from a React application. Specifically, we're going to take a look at how to make use of a particular books API to create, read, update, and delete books from inside of a working React app that we will be building from scratch. You can get the source code from this tutorial from the link given in the description box below. Before we get started, let's take a look at the RESTful API that we'll be working with. So I'm going to open up Postman, which is a Chrome application that allows you to interact with RESTful APIs, and it gives you a really nice user interface to set different parameters and data and other variables. So the API is on this URL, and if I select get here and then send the request, you can see a single book is returned. It has a title, rating, and an ID. So let's say that we want to add a new book to the collection. We can select a post request and then go to the body. Make sure that this xwww form URL encoded is selected, and then add a new book. So the title is The Intelligent Investor, and the rating is, let's say, it's 4.1 or 4.2. And if I send the request, you can see the same object is returned back to us with a new ID. If I then go ahead and select the get request from this menu and then send the request again, you can see now there are two books instead of one. Now let's say that we want to delete this particular book with the ID of 3. So we can just go ahead and do /3 and then select delete request from the menu and then send the request. Now if I send the get request to /books, we can see that there's only one book remaining. Finally, let's take a look at how to update a book that's already stored. So let's just say we want to update this 4.2 to 3.2. We can select put request here and go to the body, and for the title, let's just keep the title the same. Copy, paste, and instead of 4.2, let's just do 3.2. Now if I send this request, I get back an empty object, but we didn't specify a the ID. So ID was 3, I think. So if I send this, or 4, yeah, so the ID was 4, and if we specify that we want to update the fourth book, a book with the ID of 4, and we send a put request with all the fields, you can see that we can update the book in the database. So let's just say that we want to get all the books again. You can send a get request, and you can see there's only one book remaining. So this is the API that we'll be working with. Okay, let's just close this now, and I'm gonna open up Visual Studio Code. This is the API that is running in the background. Let's open up a new tab, and what I'm gonna do is navigate to the folder where I want to create the React application. So I'm gonna move to /d code random tutorials. This is where I want to create the React application. So I'm just gonna do create React app and then the name of my application, which is going to be books app. So I'm assuming here that you already have installed create React app. If you haven't, you just have to install it, and the way to do it is to do npm install -g create React app. So I'm just gonna run the previous command, which was create React app books app, this command will go ahead and generate a new React application for us. Okay, that's done. Now I can just cd into the directory and open it up in another window. And then run yarn start or npm start, depending on what you prefer. So port 3000 is already being used for the API, so I'm just gonna hit yes and say that I would like to create an app on another port instead. So the React app is now running on 3001. Starting the development server, and it's up and running. So now I am going to go over app.js and start to modify the application. So I'm just going to remove all of this junk from here, remove the app.css file, we don't need it, and logo.svg file too. Let's save this so we can delete these extra files from here. So app.test.js, we don't need that. App.css, we don't need that. In logo.svg, we're not using a logo, and I think that's it. So now in the app.js, we are going to start writing our application. But before we do, I know that we're going to be using Bootstrap, so I'm going to want to include Bootstrap in our React application somehow. And the smart way to do it is to use a third-party library called React.Trap. So if I open this up, it's a easy to use React Bootstrap for components. So if you take a look at the installation process, all you have to do is install React.Trap along with, of course, Bootstrap. So I'm just going to open up my terminal, and I'm going to open up a new terminal window, and then I'm going to run yarn add Bootstrap and the React.Trap. I'm going to hit enter. So once you've added both of these, you're going to want to import the Bootstrap CSS in the index.js file. So I'm going to copy this and go to index.js, and where it's importing index.css, I'm going to import before the index.css so that we can override any of the Bootstrap styles. So now I'm gonna move over to the index.css and delete all of this. Alright, so I think we're good to go. So first of all, let's add a container, and then we know that we are going to need a table, so I'm gonna hit create a table element. Notice the capitalization, it's not the default HTML component, it's a component, it's a Bootstrap component coming from the React.Trap library that we just installed. So we can import this table element from React.Trap. Thead tr td, or I'm sorry, th, and the first one is going to be for the ID. The second column is going to be for the title of the book, and the third column would be for the rating, and the fourth one is going to be the actions that you can take. For instance, you can edit a book and you can delete a book. Now I'm going to create the body of the table, dr and td. I'm just gonna enter some dummy data here just to test if everything is working. Book title, and let's say 2.5, And for the actions, I'm just going to use a button component, which again comes from the React Strap library that we just imported. Button, and the color of the button is going to be success, and the size is going to be small. So the button would say edit, and the second button, which will have the color of danger, which is basically a red color to indicate something is dangerous here, and this is going to be the delete button. So if I save this and move over to our application, okay, it's working. So everything is exactly as we want, except for I think we need a little bit more space here. So to add some space, I'm just going to give it a class, and Bootstrap has these utility classes that allow you to apply margins on the fly. So I could just say margin right 2. It'll give a little breathing room between these two buttons. Perfect. So apart from that, I need a actually, let's just populate this table before we move on. So what I'm gonna do is, first of all, give this app a state. So this state will have books, which at the start will be an empty array, but as the component mounts, I'm gonna send an axios get request to our RESTful API server, which is at localhost 3000 /books, and once we get the response back, we will set the state, and we'll do books this, and we will update the books to response.data. So response.data is basically what's returned by the server when you request this endpoint. So, but before we run that, I know we're gonna run into a problem because we haven't actually installed axios. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do yarn add axios, and then import it at the top. Axios from axios. It's being installed. Okay, it's done now. So let's move on over here and refresh the page. Alright, so now it's working. But of course we have set the state to the data, but we haven't actually implemented it into our render method. So I'm just going to create a new variable called books, and I'm going to set this equal to this.state.books.map, which means I will map over each book and then return this single row. So I'll return this row, and this row will have a key prop, which will be book.id and book.id. For the title, it's going to be book.title. For the rating, it's going to be book.rating. And let's just ignore these two buttons for now. Let's save this, refresh the page. Okay, we haven't actually updated here, so I'm just going to remove this row and instead say books. Save this. And you can see the actual data is now being rendered in our table. As simple as that. Alright, so now let's just add the functionality of adding a new book to the list, to the collection. And to do that, we're going to use a modal window. It's one of the reasons why I installed React.js, because it allows us to use modals and other components very simply. Something that you wouldn't be able to do if you just import the regular Bootstrap CSS file. Alright, so in order to create a modal, what we need to do is, well, this. So let's just copy this, and above our table, let's just paste it here. So instead of danger, I'm gonna say primary, and on click, what's going to happen? Well, I'm just gonna do, say, toggle new book modal. Alright, so the title of the button is going to be add book. Let's do add a new book. So when the model is open, the isOpen prop of this modal component will determine whether or not the modal is, well, currently open. So they are setting this to a state variable, which is exactly what I'm going to do, but instead of just modal, I'm going to rename it to new book modal. Alright, so on click, I'm just going to run this toggle method that I am going to create shortly. So I'm just going to copy and paste this method wherever the toggle is. So we don't need a class name here, and the toggle and the toggle here and the toggle here. Alright, now we do need to import these components that we're using, and they're all of course coming from the React.js library. So modal header, modal body, the modal footer. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Alright. Let me put a comma there, save this, and get this in the browser. Okay. Cannot read property bind if undefined. So yeah, we need to define this method right here. And what this method will do is update a state variable called new book modal, and I'm going to set this to true, where initially it will be false. So when I save this, and if I click on this, okay, so, well, it's not working. Okay, so I can't just mutate the state here like this. I need to use set state. And the new book modal is going to be set to true. Alright. If I click add book now, you can see the modal is appearing. Perfect. So instead of model title, let's just go ahead and update this to add a new book. And for the model body, I'm going to create a new form. So let's just go ahead over to the React strap documentation and search for input groups, and this is how you create inputs. So I'm just gonna paste this. And no, I don't need an add-on. I just need a simple input. Let's just search for simple forms. There you go. That's what I need. So input group and a label and an input inside of it. So for this can be title. Type is going to be text, but I'm just gonna remove this entirely. The name, we don't need that. The ID is title. The placeholder, we don't need that. Let's take a look at it in the browser. We need to import these three: input group, and label. And this should do the trick. And if I click the add book now, that's how it looks. So there's definitely something missing here. This should be form group instead of input group. So form group, form group. Save that and update the reference here. Form group. Alright, so this is working now. We need to add another field, which is going to be the rating. Of the book. So as you can see, there are two fields, and instead of do something, let's update this to add book. Alright, so this is looking good. Now we just need to wire them up. So I'm gonna move over to state and define a new state variable, which is going to be new book data, and it's going to be an object with a title, which is going to be an empty string, and a rating, which is going to be an empty string as well. Or you can put 0 there if you want, but I think it's fine. Let's move on over here and specify the value to be this state new book data title. And whenever you change the input, we want to run, or we want to update the title. So to do that, let's just do this dot set state, and this is going to be new form data. Let's first get the new form data from the state. Then let's update the new form data dot title to be the e dot target dot value. So what we're doing is basically getting the new form data and then setting the title property of it to the new value of the input, and then finally updating the state. So let's save this and see if it's working. It's not. Concept property title of undefined. Cannot set property title of undefined. So oh, it's not a new form data, it's new book data. New book data. New book data. And finally, new book data. That should fix it. And as you can see, it's working perfectly now. Okay, we have to fix this. For some reason, it's not working anymore. Notice that we have set the new book model to true, but that's not exactly what we need. We need the opposite of what's currently there. So we have to say opposite of this state new book model. This dot state dot new book model. So once we save this, I think that it will work perfectly. Alright, so we have title and rating, which is working. Okay, so we need to do the same for the rating as we did for the title. So let's move on over here and set the value of the input to this dot state dot new book data, and on change we will run an anonymous function which will basically set the rating of the book to be whatever the current value of the input is. Alright, so okay, so that has to be the rating, like so. Okay, so now I think everything is working, but we need to change the add books on click to a new method. So what we're going to do is we will run a new method called add book and bind it to this. So add book, let's go over here and add a new method called add book. And what this will do is send an axios request to http localhost 3000 and books, and send the new book data along with it. Once that's done, we can console log the response.data to see what's being returned back. Alright, so new title, rating would be 4.5. Let's open up the console first and click add book. So you can see that the new book is being saved to the database and it's being returned here. So what we'll do is update the state Well, first of all, we will pull the books out from the state. Then we will push a new book onto the books array, which will be the data which will be the data that came back from the server. And then finally we will reset the state with the current books. Alright, so and after setting the books, we also want to hide the modal window. So what we'll do is we'll do new book modal and set it to false. And finally, one last thing that I think that we should do is reset the new book data to this object, so that once we add a new book and the modal closes, we click on the add new button again, we don't get the previous data, so we don't get the old data. So that's why we have to update a new property and set it equals to the empty strings. Right, I think that's it. And if we see add book, new book, rating would be 2.5, and add a book, you can see the new book is being added with the correct rating, and if you refresh the page, the data is being persisted onto the database. Let's add some breathing room over here. Just below the app container, I'm gonna put nh1. Let's say books app, and for the button, I'm going to make use of those utility classes that I just talked about, and I'm just going to do a margin on the y-axis of degree 3. So once I save this, you can see that we get some breathing room over here, and we get our heading here. So you can see that we can now add new books and we can view them. Now let's add the edit functionality. Alright, so in order to edit the book, we will follow somewhat of a similar procedure. We will create a new state object and we will call it edit book data. This will also contain an ID, because any book that is selected for editing will have an ID. So let's put an empty string for now. Or you can put 0 there or null if you prefer, but empty string is fine for me. Now I'm gonna move over to the books variable, where I am iterating over the books array and then rendering a new row for each of the books. What I'm gonna do here is add an on click listener on the edit button. So on click, and what we're gonna do is edit book, and instead of edit book, we should probably open. Okay, let's go with the edit book and bind it to this variable. What we also need is the ID, the title, and the rating. So book.id, book.title, and finally book.rating. So what's happening here is basically whenever I click on the edit button, these values are going to be sent to the edit book function or method, which I'm going to create now. So the first one is going to be the ID, then the title, and finally the rating. And if I console.log the title, you can see that if I open up the console and then click edit, you can see the title is being logged onto the console. So it's being passed correctly. Once I'm here, what I want to do is toggle another modal window. So let's create that modal window. So I'm just going to copy whatever I have for the new book model, because most of it is going to be very similar, and I'm going to paste it here. But instead of this new book models, I want to call it edit book model, and for toggle I want to call it toggle edit book model. Edit a book, toggle edit book model, and for the input I'm going to do edit book data dot title, and just change wherever there's new. I'm gonna update this to edit book data. So edit book data, edit book data, edit, 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 and edit. Alright, so finally, instead of add book.bind, I'm going to do update book.bind. Change this to update book, and toggle new book model, toggle edit book model. So now I'm gonna go over to the state variables and add a new model, edit book model, set this to false, and edit book data is already there, so I don't need to worry about that. So whenever I'm about to edit the book, what I'm going to do is set this state, set new book, or edit book data, and set this to have an ID, and set this to have those ID, title, and rating that is being passed from the component. So I can save that. So this variable has now the currently selected items, currently selected books information, and by extension I will have the it will populate the input fields in the edit model that I just created. So let's save this and refresh the page. Okay, a lot of it is not working. Cannot read properly, bind of undefined. Edit book model. Okay, so I need to create a new method which will be called, instead of toggle new book modal, it will be called toggle edit book modal. And the new book modal, instead of new book, edit, and new changes to edit. Save that, and it should at least change the error now. Okay, cannot read properly, bind if undefined, update book. So we need an update book along with the add. So update book. So let's see if that changes the error. Okay, I can't see any error. And if I click edit, okay, I haven't actually set up the, yeah, edit book to bind. So when I edit this book, I also want to toggle the modal. So along with updating the state for the book data, I'm also going to update the state for the modal. So edit book modal, I'm going to copy this and edit here, book modal, set this to the opposite of this, .state.edit book modal. Alright. Alright, so I do realize it's a little bit confusing, but let's just go over the whole process once and see if it makes any sense. So what we're doing here is we're populating all of the books into the table, and if we go over to where the books variable is defined, it's basically a map of all, it's basically rendering all of the books. So it's mapping over the books variable and then displaying each book in a table row. So inside of this table row, a button is present that says edit, and whenever you click on that button, this method is run, and the ID, title, and the rating is being passed to this method. The method is called edit book. Let's take a look. Edit book basically sets a few state variables. It sets the edit book data to the ID, title, and the rating. So for instance, if you select this book to edit, the ID will be 4, the title will be The Intelligent Investor, and the rating will be 3.2. So there's that. And along with setting this variable, it also resets the edit book modal, which basically determines whether or not the modal is being shown or not. So it basically toggles the modal. Alright, so and the modal basically contains the form, and the inputs are bound to the edit book data variable that we just updated. So I think it should be clear now. If not, drop a comment and me or someone else will help you out. But for now, what we need to do is handle this update book. Whenever I click this update book, the update book method is called, and the update book method is currently empty. So what we need to do is basically send an axios request to the localhost 3000 books and the ID of the book that we're currently updating, which will be this state edit books edit book data .id, and the data that we're sending through is the title, which is, well, let's pull out the title and the reading from this .state .edit book data. Alright, so the title and the rating. And once it's done, the response is returned, and we can console.log the response.data. Alright, so seems like there's a syntax error, and we need to put a plus there. So we're basically concatenating two strings, or a string in a number, so we need a plus symbol there. So now if we click edit and update this to 3.5 and update book, you can see that the updated book is being returned from the server. Alright, once it's updated, what we want to do is refresh the list. So currently we don't have that much data, but if you are working with a lot of data, what you want to do is basically get this particular object and then replace it with what's already present as with that ID. So that is how ideally it should be done, because that would save, well, that would be the memory efficient way of doing it. But the easier way would be to just recall the server for all of the books and just update the list. So I'm just going to create a new method called refresh list, or you could say refresh books. And what this would do, underscore refresh. Alright, what we're doing here is sending basically what we did over here when we got all of the books in the start. So instead of doing all of this, what I'm going to do is basically run the refresh books method, and then once I'm there, I can just put the same get request in this method. So what's happening here is basically I'm sending a get request to the books that will return all of the books, and then I'm setting the books variable to the data that is being returned from the server. So if I refresh here, so if we click on the edit button and change this rating to 1.6 and update the book, you can see that it's being updated here. One thing that I noticed is that the modal window does not go away when we update the book. So once this is done, I also want to update the state and say edit book model is set to false, and edit book data to have an ID of empty string, the title of an empty string, and the rating of empty string. And I'm gonna save. this. And now if I update some rating, so let's just say it's 4.5, update the book, it updates here, and it also removes the modal window. Okay, so now we can add new books and we can edit the books. So for instance, if you put a full stop there, it updates. But we can't yet delete the books. So that is the last thing that we're going to do. So let's move on over here where the button is. So it's probably the easiest thing to do. So if you move over to the books where we're defining the books markup, and in here on the delete button, I'm just gonna set in on click listener. Which will basically do this dot delete book and bind it to this, and I'm just gonna pass in the current ID of the book that is being deleted. So if I move now over to the method and add a delete book, so it receives an ID, and what we do is basically send a delete request to the server. Uploads 3000 books, and we do need to provide an ID here, so I'm just gonna concatenate that, and once we're done, a response is returned. And what we'll do is basically refresh the books. I'm just gonna move it over the refresh books method. Alright, so let's take a look if it works. So let's just say that we want to delete this new book, and click delete and refresh the page. Okay, it's not working. Let's take a look at the console. Okay, 44 not found. It's not book, it's books. So a typo there. Let's refresh the page and see. If I click delete, it goes away. So there you go. Now you can add a new book. New book 4.7, add book, and it gets added here. We can delete the book, and we can of course edit the book. New book title. There you go. So in terms of code, you can do quite a lot here. You can clean up much of this mess, because in this example I'm just trying to make this work and trying to create this CRUD functionality as fast as possible. So but that's just beyond the scope of this tutorial. So for now, I think that should pretty much do it. Hey everyone, thank you very much for watching the entire thing. Let me remind you that you can get the entire source code that we wrote from the link given in the description box below. Also, you can subscribe to this channel to get more content like this. Have a great day.